I remember that corridor more clearly than any battlefield I ever stood on. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of machine oil and recycled dust. Hive lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly amber glow on walls scarred by decades of neglect. That's when I saw her. A woman, thin, tired, wrapped in a patchwork cloak that had seen too many winters. Beside her were two children, both trying to look small, as if the air itself might devour them if they drew too much of it. They stood near a makeshift stall made of rusted metal and scavenged plasteel, selling scraps of fungus bread and ration cubes. Technically, that was illegal. No license. No guild seal. The law of the hive was clear. Commerce without sanction was theft from the emperor himself. For 23 years I'd upheld that law without question. I'd broken bones, written reports, and watched people vanish into the lower cells, all in the name of order. But that day, something was different. Maybe it was the way the child looked at me. Big eyes too hollow for his age. Maybe it was the silence. In the underhive, silence is rare. Noise is life. But here, even the hum of the ventilation units felt like it was holding its breath. I rested my hand on the grip of my shock maul. It hummed faintly, hungry for duty. My voice should have followed. The same ritual words I'd spoken 1,000 times before. By decree of the Lex Imperialis, you are under arrest, but the words didn't come. Instead, I just stood there staring. My reflection stared back from her eyes, the black-armored enforcer of imperial law, face hidden behind a mask of mirrored glass. To her I was judgment itself, and yet I saw fear there. Not the kind that comes before punishment, but the kind born from too many nights, wondering if your children will still be breathing when the lights return. I knew what the decree meant. It meant this. Woman would disappear into a holding cell until her body gave out. It meant her children would vanish into the hive's machinery, turned into servitors, or worse. It meant I'd file another report, stamped order maintained, and life would grind on. Another number, another ghost. The younger one sneezed. A small sound, barely more than a breath, yet somehow that was what broke me. I remember the click of my weapon deactivating. The hum died, replaced by the low hiss of the power cell winding down. That sound was almost sacrilegious, like silencing a prayer. You will pack your things, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. You will leave this corridor. You will not return. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then she understood. Her lips trembled, not with fear this time, but disbelief. Yes, my lord, she whispered, almost afraid that if she spoke too loudly, reality would shatter. I turned before she could thank me. I couldn't bear it. Mercy is a sin in the Imperium, worse than cruelty, worse than cowardice. If my fellow arbitrators heard of this, it would go down as dereliction of duty. As I walked away, the weight of silence followed me. My boots echoed against the ferrocrete floor, each step louder than the last, and somewhere deep inside, the voice that had haunted me since the riot whispered again. The Emperor protects, maybe he does, or maybe he just watches, to see if any of us still remember what that's supposed to mean. I didn't report the incident. I told myself it was mercy once and never again. But mercy doesn't vanish, it stains you. It follows. That night, as I stripped off my armor and laid my maul on the rack, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see an arbitrator. I saw a man who had hesitated, a man who had chosen, and in the Imperium. Choice is dangerous. Sleep never came easy after that day. Not that it ever did, but now, there was something new in the dark. Something waiting for me behind closed eyes. Every time I drifted off, I saw her face, the woman from the corridor, burning under interrogation lights that weren't there. I saw her children's hands reaching out, calling to me from somewhere I couldn't reach. And when I woke up, it wasn't silence that greeted me. It was the hum, that faint, endless hum of the hive, the sound of lives grinding against metal, of souls being crushed into obedience. They say you stop hearing it after a while. I never did. The precinct was colder after that. Not physically, temperature in the hive never changes, but in tone. The clerk spoke softer when I passed. Brashen, my partner, had started watching me differently, like he was measuring something behind my words. He never asked. Not directly, but I could feel the questions hanging in the air between us like static. You've been off lately, he said one morning, calibrating his shotgun. You good? I'm fine, I lied. Right, fine. He didn't push, but the look he gave me lingered. The kind of look you give someone you know is slipping, And you're not sure if you should catch them or report them. I tried drowning it out. More patrols, more arrests, more noise. The law doesn't care about conscience. The law is the conscience. At least that's what I used to believe. Then came the summons. The cog seal on the parchment was cracked in black. Internal Review Division. They only show up when something doesn't add up. I read the words 3 times, but they didn't change. Arbitrator Cale Morn, you are to report to Precinct Primus Level 17. For review of conduct, failure to comply is admission of guilt. That was the moment I knew someone had seen. Maybe a camera I'd missed, or a clerk who noticed the missing entry in the arrest logs. Maybe Brashen, or maybe it was just the Emperor reminding me mercy has a cost. That night I sat alone in my quarters, armor plates spread across the table. The glow from the lumen strip flickered. Every shadow seemed to twist, lean closer, whisper. In the mirror, my face looked like a stranger's. The scar above my eyebrow caught the light, a pale reminder of a riot long ago. Back then I'd believed the world could still be saved by law and fear. Now, I wasn't sure what I believed in anymore. I poured a measure of Amasec, cheap, synthetic, enough to burn. The glass trembled in my hand. I wanted to forget just for one night. Forget her eyes. Forget the silence. Forget the way I'd turned my weapon off instead of on. But the mind doesn't forget what the heart confesses. The next morning, I walked to the precinct like a man walking into his own trial. The corridors seemed narrower, the walls closer. Every servo skull that drifted overhead felt like an accusation. Brashen met me near the gate. You called up for review? He asked. I nodded. He hesitated, then said, You'll be fine. But even he didn't sound like he believed it. The review chamber was deep in the core, far from the noise of the city. It smelled of dust and recycled incense. A single light burned above a steel table. Behind it sat 3 officers. Gray uniforms, featureless expressions, vox recorders running. The one in the center looked up. Arbitrator Cale Morn, he said, voice flat. We've reviewed your recent conduct reports. There is inconsistency. That word again. Inconsistency. The polite way of saying we think you lied. I kept my face still. In what regard, sir? He slid a data slate across the table. On it, an image, grainy, low resolution, but I knew it instantly. The corridor. The woman. Me standing there, weapon deactivated, my stomach dropped. You failed to log an arrest in Sector Gamma 5, he continued. Yet surveillance confirms interaction. Explain. I could have lied. Said I issued a verbal warning that she fled before detainment. But lies are like cracks in glass. Once they start, they spread until everything shatters. I exercised discretion, I said slowly. The accused had no history of resistance. The goods were minor. I deemed the offense not worth escalation. The officer's eyes narrowed slightly. Discretion is not your duty, arbitrator. Judgment belongs to the Emperor. Silence stretched between us. My heartbeat felt loud enough to echo. Finally, he said, You will remain on administrative watch until further notice. Report daily. Do not leave the hive sector. And that was it. No cell. No punishment yet. Just waiting. As I walked out, I realized something that chilled me more than any verdict ever could. They weren't angry because I'd shown mercy. They were curious about why. Days turned into weeks. Or maybe it was the other way around. Time in the hive doesn't move and it grinds. Every cycle feels the same filtered air, the same mechanical heartbeat echoing through concrete and steel. But something had changed. I could feel it, like a shift in the air pressure before a storm. Everywhere I went, eyes followed, not the usual stares from the desperate or the broken. These were colder, calculated. The servo skulls lingered longer when they passed me. Patrols I didn't recognize crossed my routes more often. Brashen stopped meeting my eyes altogether. And the clerks, Emperor bless them, couldn't even pretend not to whisper anymore. Administrative watch, they said. Internal review. But I knew better. This wasn't just an inquiry. This was observation. Someone was watching. It started with little things. My quarters had been cleaned when I hadn't ordered it. My locker seal was slightly misaligned, like it had been opened and closed by careful hands. Once I returned from a routine patrol to find a new data slate on my desk. No origin tag, no signature. Just one phrase displayed across the screen. Mercy breeds heresy. I told myself it was a prank, a warning from the precinct, a reminder not to stray again. But the font, the phrasing, it felt older, colder, official. The Inquisition doesn't send letters, they send messages. One evening, as I left the precinct, a figure stood at the far end of the corridor, cloaked, still, watching. I blinked, and he was gone. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was unraveling, but the truth, I didn't know anymore where paranoia ended and reality began. My dreams grew darker. Every night I saw the woman again. Sometimes she was alive, sometimes burned, sometimes kneeling in front of a faceless judge. Her children stared from behind glass, no sound, just eyes. Always watching, always waiting. I'd wake drenched in sweat, the words still echoing in my skull. Mercy breeds heresy. By the third week, I'd stopped wearing my badge off duty. I couldn't stand the weight of it anymore. The Aquila felt like judgment pressing into my chest. Brashen came by once, so I tried to talk. He didn't even knock. Just stepped in, tossed a ration bar on the table, and leaned against the wall. "You're being watched," he said quietly. I didn't answer. "I know you think I don't see it, but I do. The skulls, the reports. Hell, even the Medici scanner's been redirected to your sector." "Why?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Why me?" He just shrugged. "Because mercy gets noticed, and nothing gets the Inquisition's attention faster than a man who hesitates." Then he left, just like that. No advice, no comfort, just the truth, cold and sharp as a blade. After that, I stopped trying to pretend. Every shift, I felt the walls closing in. Every report I filed felt like an accusation. Every voice in the Vox feed sounded a little too familiar. The hive has a way of eating people. Not with teeth, with silence. You don't disappear here by dying. You disappear by being forgotten. I thought I was ready for that. I was wrong. One night I heard a knock, 3 soft taps. When I opened the door, there was no one there, just a small data stick on the floor. I took it inside, slid it into my console. The screen flickered me static, then an image. The corridor. The woman. But this time, there was more. A second figure stood at the far end of the frame, cloaked in red, a rosette glinting faintly in the low light. Watching. The timestamp was from that same day. I hadn't seen them then. But they'd seen me. The image faded. A line of text appeared. "Cale Morn. Your judgment is not yet complete." Then the file deleted itself. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the blank screen. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing that my story was no longer my own. The next morning, I found a new order in my log. Report to Sublevel 9, Chamber 3, no signature. No seal, just the Emperor's sigil burned into the corner. That was when I realized the inquiry wasn't over. It had only just begun. Sublevel 9 was colder than I remembered. The air tasted of iron and disinfectant, the way all interrogation levels do. Sterile, but never clean. I walked alone. No escort, no briefing, no explanation. Only the sound of my boots echoing through the empty corridors, counting down the distance to whatever waited for me in Chamber 3. When I reached it, the door opened without a sound. The room was small, too small for ceremony, too plain for judgment. One chair, one light, one shadow sitting across from me. The figure didn't move as I entered, didn't speak, just watched. And when the light caught the edge of her rosette, that unmistakable sigil of the Inquisition, I understood what kind of judgment this would be. "Sit," she said. Her voice was calm, detached like a surgeon about to cut. I obeyed. "You are Arbitrator Cale Morn, Precinct Fortress LX-91. 23 years of service, 6 commendations for operational excellence, 3 disciplinary notes for procedural hesitation, and 1 act of recorded mercy." The words were clinical, dissecting, each fact placed like a blade on the table. She looked up from the slate. "Do you know why you're here?" "I assume," I said, because I hesitated. She smiled faintly. Not warmth, amusement. "No. You're here because you thought." That silenced me. "In the Imperium," she continued, "obedience is the purest form of faith. Thinking complicates that. It makes men dangerous." I leaned forward. "Dangerous to who?" To everyone. She rose, circling the room like a hawk evaluating prey. Her robes whispered against the stone floor, a sound that felt more threatening than any weapon. "I've read your reports," she said. "Every detail, every hesitation, every small mercy you granted those who should have been broken. You speak of law as if it were a choice, of morality as if it were relevant. Tell me, arbitrator, what do you believe the law is?" I hesitated, then spoke the truth. The law is supposed to protect the innocent. "And what is innocence in the 41st millennium?" she asked softly. "A woman who steals water to keep her child alive? A worker who disobeys ration limits? A man who questions his overseer? Innocent men fill the graveyards mourn. Guilty ones keep the machines running." She stopped behind me. I could feel the weight of her gaze through the armor. The Emperor's law is not kind. It is necessary. And necessity is the truest mercy of all. Her words burned, not because they were cruel, but because part of me believed them. I looked at her reflection in the glass wall ahead, her face half hidden in the shadows. "You call it mercy," I said. "But what we do, it doesn't save the Imperium. It just keeps it dying slower." The Inquisitor's expression didn't change. "You mistake decay for failure. The Imperium endures precisely because it has accepted its own corruption. It does not seek perfection and only continuation. That is why your kind exist, my kind. The ones who feel, who question, who doubt, yet still obey. You think you failed because you showed mercy. You haven't failed, arbitrator. You've proven that even the smallest flicker of humanity can exist without consuming itself. That's why you're still alive." I turned to face her. "You're saying this was a test?" "It always is." She stepped closer, the rosette glinting as the light caught its edges. "You stand at a crossroads, Kael Morn. One path, repentance. You bury what you feel, serve without thought, and become what you were trained to be, a perfect instrument of law. The other," she paused, "is silence, a cell, a report that concludes with the phrase purged for cause." I stared into her eyes, searching for something human. There was something there buried deep. Exhaustion, maybe. Or understanding. "You want me to forget," I said. "I want you to survive." For a long time, the only sound was the hum of the lumen above us. Then I asked the question that had been rotting inside me for weeks. "Do you ever doubt?" The Inquisitor's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. "Every day," she said, "but I do not mistake doubt for weakness. I keep it caged, because if it ever escaped," her eyes flicked toward the ceiling, toward the billions above us choking in their own survival. "The galaxy would burn." She turned back to me and placed something on the table, a mask. Standard issue, scuffed, blackened, worn from years of service. Mine. "The Emperor does not need believers, arbitrator," she said quietly. "He needs tools, and tools do not question their purpose." I stared at the mask. My reflection stared back, fractured, distorted. Then I picked it up. It felt heavier than I remembered. When I placed it over my face, the world went dark for a moment, then clear again through red-tinted lenses. The Inquisitor nodded once. "Report to the Outer Hive Command at dawn." "You are reinstated." Her voice was calm, but her eyes told a different story. Pity. Maybe even regret. As I turned to leave, she spoke again. A whisper, almost lost to the hum of the machines. "Remember what she said, Kael. Mercy breeds heresy. But sometimes, heresy is the only thing that reminds us we're still alive." The door sealed behind me with a hiss, and for the first time in years, I didn't know if I served the Emperor out of faith and or fear. They sent me to the edge of the world, not the real edge. Of course, no one ever sees that. But close enough that the air itself tastes like ash and the light never reaches the ground. The Outer Hive, where the city bleeds into the wasteland. Where law ends and survival begins. My orders were simple. Restore order to Sector Delta 12, report any signs of insurrection, and maintain compliance through decisive enforcement. In plain terms, make the people afraid again. The transport dropped me off at dawn. If you could call it dawn, the sky was a sickly orange haze, the sun smothered by centuries of pollution. Whole towers leaned against each other like dying beasts, cables dangling from their ribs. Below, the streets were rivers of sludge and shadow. I could smell the rot before I saw it. They'd given me new armor, matte black, fresh sigils, pristine lenses. It didn't feel like mine. It felt like a costume, a reminder that I was supposed to be something unquestionable. But the man beneath the armor, he hadn't forgotten. Every time I saw a mother clutching her child, every time I passed a hungry worker staring at an empty ration bin, I remembered her. The woman in the corridor, the one who looked at me like I was a storm she couldn't outrun. That look still haunted me. For weeks, I did what was expected: patrols, raids, arrests. I followed the book word for word, until the book stopped making sense. The people here were ghosts, hollowed out by hunger and fear. They didn't resist anymore. They didn't pray. They just existed. And in their silence, I heard something worse than rebellion: resignation. One night, I was called to a disturbance near the Hab tunnels, workers refusing to enter the mines. They said the air was poisoned, that the filters had failed weeks ago. My sergeant wanted to make an example. He raised his weapon and I hesitated. Again. "Stand down," I said. He looked at me like I'd just spoken heresy. "Sir, orders are clear. Non-compliance is sedition." I said, "Stand down." The crowd froze, every eye watching. They were waiting to see if we would kill them for breathing wrong. I stepped forward, took one of the respirators from a worker and looked inside. The filter was black, corroded. The air unit had failed days ago. "They're telling the truth," I said. The sergeant shook his head. "Doesn't matter. If we let them defy command, I am command," I said. For a moment, no one moved. Then I ordered the line to stand down, requisitioned the replacement filters myself, and filed a report blaming mechanical neglect. The workers didn't thank me. They just stared, because mercy in the hive is like light. When it touches you, it only reminds you how deep the darkness really is. The next morning, an encrypted message waited on my data slate. Report to the Chapel of Judgment. Alone. I knew what that meant. The chapel sat on the edge of the sector, built from black stone and rusted steel. Its windows were barred, its doors scarred by centuries of supplication. Inside, the air was cold, too cold for human comfort. A single statue loomed above the altar. The emperor enthroned, gaze unyielding. Beneath his feet, the faithful were carved in agony, their faces upturned, their hands reaching, as if salvation was something that could be touched but never held. The Inquisitor was waiting. Same robes. Same eyes. "You disobeyed again," she said. "I didn't deny it. I enforced order. The filters failed. They would have died. And now they think the law bends for them. Maybe it should." Her silence was a weapon sharper than any blade. "You were my experiment, Kale," she said at last. "I wanted to see if conscience could survive inside obedience, if faith could coexist with mercy." "And what did you find?" I asked. She stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. "That mercy is a contagion. It spreads." Then she handed me a data chip, sealed, stamped with the sigil of the Ordo Hereticus. "Inside is your next order. Carry it out and your record will be cleansed. Refuse!" I didn't need her to finish the sentence. When I slotted the chip into my reader, the screen flickered once, then displayed a name: Sergeant Varlin Trusk, the man who had questioned my command the night before. The order was clear. "Purge for dereliction." I looked up at her. "This is your test," she said softly. "You either kill a man to prove your faith, or save him and prove your guilt." I closed the reader. Outside, the smog was thicker than before. The hive lights flickered like dying stars. I stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of my weapon, the echo of her words. Then I turned and walked into the fog. The report they received later was brief. Subject Trusk. Missing. Presumed deceased because industrial collapse during inspection. No questions. No follow-up. Just another name erased from a world that forgets faster than it breathes. That night I removed my mask and placed it on the table beside my weapon. The lenses stared back, empty, silent, waiting. I whispered the words I no longer believed in. The Emperor protects. And somewhere, deep in the hive's endless darkness, I thought I heard a voice, faint, broken, but human. Maybe, but not us.